Coming up at episode 78 of Creative Writing, I'm talking with Bryan Cohen all about copywriting.
I can't go back to sleep, it's almost light. These restless thoughts have kept me up again tonight.
Hello and welcome to Creative Writing, the podcast for writers, bloggers, and creatives who want to build an online platform without being smarmy. I'm your host, Kirsten Oliphant. And if you hear any heavy breathing, I'm once again recording with a baby in my lap. So Piper is 3 weeks old and we are just enjoying the heck out of her, but she really likes to be held. So I'm holding her while recording. So baby sounds, those are a bonus for you guys today. And speaking of sound, before I get into the interview, I was so disappointed that in this interview with Bryan Cohen, I've been having issues with my USB port and am not ready to invest in another MacBook, but sometimes it decides to not work, which means my mic cuts off. So even though my mic had been working right before Bryan and I started recording, as I hit record, my mic stopped working. And so his sound is fine. My sound is terrible. I sound like I'm in some kind of tunnel shouting in your ear, both at the same time. So I apologize for that. And a big thanks to Matt McCarrick for working to make it sound, what you hear is better than how it sounded before. So yes, it stinks, but we're working on the USB port. And I just keep thinking of, I don't know if you guys saw Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, but they had a USBS thing. And that's what that makes me think of that's just BS to my USB port. Okay, so yes, that's my warning about sound is in the intro and outro, you may hear a baby. And during the interview, I just sound terrible. So my apologies there. It drives me crazy. And what are you going to do? That's just kind of how life is sometimes. So I am talking today with Bryan Cohen from bryancohen.com, and that's Bryan with a Y. He's also one of the hosts of the Sell More Books show and also just started a new comedy podcast. It's called Something Nice to Say, so you can also listen to that. He's just a lot of fun and knows a lot about copywriting. He does blurbs for authors and has written a book on writing your sizzling synopsis, which I will link to all of those things in the show notes. And I was excited to talk to him because I feel like copywriting, for those of us who are bloggers and writers who are trying to make a living, we have to write a lot of copy. And so we actually talk about what that is. And we talk about sales pages and book descriptions and how to improve on your copywriting and why, as someone who considers themselves a creative writer, you shouldn't be afraid of copywriting or turned off by it. So without further ado, let's jump into this interview. And you can find the show notes for this at creativewriting.com/078. Well, today I have Bryan Cohen on the show, and I'm so excited because we're talking about copywriting. How you doing today, Bryan?
I'm doing great, Kirsten. How are you?
I'm good. I don't know why, but I kept thinking, like, when I was like planning out this interview in my head, I kept hearing the whole like SNL character, like the making copies, copywriting.
I have done that many times in my head.
Excellent. Okay. So it's not just me then. I was like, I feel kind of like a dork. So you're a dork too. That's great. And I just insulted you. It's a good way to start an interview. But I am really excited to talk about copywriting because I feel like it's something that I don't fully get, and I feel like people really struggle with it. And I think maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we make too much of it in our heads. And so you are going to shed all the light on all of the things related to copy today.
All the light on all the things.
Yes, it's going to be glorious. So why don't we start with like the really, really super basics? What is copywriting, and why is it copywriting? Why isn't it just writing? I never understand this question. So shed some light, Bryan.
I think the term is just so that it has a term. I guess everything needs a term, but copywriting, as I see it, is writing where you're trying to get someone to take an action. So you'll often see copywriting on advertisements on the subway or in a magazine. You'll see copywriting for authors for a book description or in an email to readers. It's targeted writing. That doesn't mean it can't be natural. It doesn't mean it can't be funny or weird or your personality, but underneath all of that, it needs to have some kind of purpose, some kind of reason that you want these people to do something, like buy your book or join your email list or whatever it is.
That's a great description. I think sometimes I think of like the old Seinfeld, like the J. Peterman catalog, like that job that Elaine had where she wrote that. And I had a friend who actually wrote like the copy for Sky Mall ads, which I thought was fascinating. And so that was like her job, which is pretty cool. So if you ever bought something on Sky Mall, it's because my friend Jenna wrote really great copy. But I like that idea of like underneath it all, you want someone to take an action. But I think the whole idea of like writing it in your own voice, or it doesn't have to be funny. I think people get this sort of like thing in their head about copywriting and how like it's sort of like this mental block. I know you work with people on their copy. Do you feel like you see that kind of mental block situation?
Oh, I do. I really do. And people always share the meme of the Gollum from Lord of the Rings saying we must write the copy, but we hates it, sort of thing.
I've never seen that. That's awesome.
It's really we must write the blurb, but we hates it. But it's pretty funny, and it's true. Everyone has this feeling like it's the type of writing they hate. They're writers, they're authors, but it's the type that they hate. And I think it's just a little mix of attitude and bad reputation for it being really difficult. And I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It can be difficult because when you're writing a 60,000 word book, not all of the words you put in there are winners. It's just how it is. I'm sorry. Whether you're an indie, whether you're traditionally published, not every sentence is a winner. But when you're doing something that has to be shorter and more condensed, like a book description, like a Facebook ad, which is even shorter than a book description, you have to make sure everything in there is gold. And it almost takes you to this like higher standard that freezes you up. And that is tough. That is tough for people. But I do think that obviously I wouldn't be promoting copywriting and talking about how people can improve it if I didn't think it was possible, if I hadn't seen authors who once stunk at copy starting to get a better handle on it. So it is possible to not hate it and to do it well.
Well, and you also, I think sometimes the like lie that we believe maybe is like, if you're creative, then copywriting is the antithesis of that. But you write fiction and nonfiction and copy. So like, if you can do it, it doesn't mean we all can do it to your level, but you can be a creative writer and also write copy. It doesn't have to be like just this fancy sort of technical idea, maybe. I don't know. I think that's what I hear from people sometimes. I
do think copywriting is creative. The funny thing is about me and copy, because I started writing for other blogs and whatnot back in 2010 or so. And I found that the reason I had a little bit of a leg up, and this is something I've had to work on a lot, but the reason I had a little bit of a leg up on being able to write pretty decent copy is because I took poetry classes in college.
Awesome. And no one would think that. No one's going to think, I'm a poet and I also write great sales copy. Like, those are not the things you think go together. So that's really kind of fun to hear. Well, what made that kind of give you that leg up, do you think?
When you practice the sound of words and the very short, when you practice the sound of words and the very short phrases, and you're thinking about rhyming and you're thinking about number of syllables, sort of stuff. When you practice that and then you have to write something that has a little bit of science to it, which poetry has a lot of science to it. It's a very mix of art and science. Because you've got to get the right number of syllables, the right sound of word, one after the other. When you start to hear that over and over again, and when your poetry professors force you to memorize poems of all different types, you get a sense of what this thing should sound like and which word best leads into the next word, which is so important in copy. Just so important in book descriptions. It's very helpful for fiction as well. It's been very helpful for writing better fiction. But when you have to write a poem length book description, having had that practice writing shorter things is extremely helpful.
Well, what do you think, because I know you look at copy, you actually do work for people, people hire you for this, and you do your own. What are some of the things that like good copy have in common? Like, what are some of the things that really make for effective copywriting?
The best copywriting grabs the target person right away. And for something with, say, if it's related to fiction, a book description, it's some kind of hook related to that genre that people love. If it's in vampire romance, that hook better have something about two people getting ready to knock boots and vampires. If it's nonfiction and you're trying to promote, let's say, email lists for writers, your hook better have something in there about how to make emails work for you, or how to make it so that you can connect with more readers so that you sell more books. Like, it has to be the thing that people are looking for right off the bat. So it has to match. Like, it almost has to match your reader expectations right off the bat. If you meander, if you kind of waffle around what you're trying to describe, you're going to lose a lot of people right off the bat, because they need something that says, oh, this is about me. Because there's all this, like, if you're going to go with the brain, the reticular activating system, it filters out everything that doesn't matter to you, which is why we're not falling on the ground and seizing when we walk through like Times Square because there's 900 million ads. But the brain filters what doesn't matter to us. So if we know right off the bat that something, that a piece of copy matters to us, we perk up, we pay more attention. Doesn't mean we focus 100%. I'm not sure if that's possible anymore in the world we live in, but we focus a lot more. And so that's really the first big thing. And the other parts, I think, of good copy are flow, because if you've got someone's focus and then something weird is in there that knocks you kind of out of it, like something doesn't make sense, that doesn't really work. And then something that tells you to actually go and take the action. You know these, I know these, a lot of your listeners know calls to action. If you have a piece of copy that doesn't have a call to action in it, which is a phrase, usually in the form of a command that tells you to do something, if you don't actually have that call to action in there, people are less likely to buy your book, join your email list, enter even a giveaway, something that's free, and you can win something. Without a call to action, you're going to have less people. So you need that strong hook. It needs to flow, nothing too weird that kicks you out of it, and something that tells you what to do at the end.
That's really great advice. That's a really nice breakdown of what it is, really. I mean, I think for people who are kind of like, I don't understand. I think a lot of people, I just hear them saying like they're just going to hire somebody to write their copy. And, I wonder too, does it matter what kind of copy? Because I know you do a lot of book descriptions, but like how, for example, might a book description differ from a sales page, or are they different?
They're very similar in some ways. A sales page usually has to do a little more heavy lifting. A full-on a sales page for a program or a course or something often needs to do more heavy lifting. But the reason that is because usually those programs are over $100. But
okay.
for a $2.99 book, you're like, okay, is it something in a genre I read? Does it flow? Does it sound good? And do people seem to like it? Does it have that social proof there? If that's the case, good, they're clicking it. For something that's over $100, people need a little more. They need a little more convincing, which is usually why you'll see. We've all seen those longer form sales letters with multiple calls to action, multiple buttons to click. The reason they do that is because it's very difficult to convince people to buy something more expensive.
Yeah.
But for a book description, you don't need quite as much.
Okay, so this may be like totally not in your wheelhouse to answer this question, but what does it say about me that I never read long sales pages and I skip to the price and then decide if I'm buying it or not? Like that's literally how I do sales pages. What does that say about me?
I actually do the same thing now because I don't have time for all that. You're the same way, I think. Um, I skip to the price. I'll use like the command key on my Mac and scroll all the way to the bottom of the page with one click. And what that says about us, I think, is that we're a certain kind of buyer that we make our decisions based on price. And if we trust the person who has sent us to that sales page, we're going to assume it's a good product. If we don't trust, then we're at least going to look just for curiosity. But I think it says that we already know kind of what we're looking for. And if the price is right, we'll get it.
Awesome. Okay, I'm glad you didn't say it just means we're like lazy or cheap. Although
we might be a little lazy.
Maybe a little bit of those as well.
Yeah.
Well, so what, like thinking about a book, because you said, obviously a sales page has to do more heavy lifting. And I think that is true I keep hearing about the long sales pages and I'm like, okay, except for me. But for everybody else, or for the people that don't share our either brilliant or lazy cheap kind of attitude about it, how much difference will it make then if a book has great copy? Because I can see people saying, well, if it's $2.99, why do I need to worry about the copy? Like, what would you say to somebody who kind of doesn't see the importance of that?
Let's say that great copy versus good copy gets one more person out of 100 to buy the book. So it goes up by 1%. So you've got 5% of people who buy the book instead of 4%. And I think that's, pretty fair that could happen. It might go up by more than 1%. It might go up 50%. Who knows? But let's just make it easy like that. If you then send 10,000 people to that page for like a huge promotion over the course of time, you send a lot of people there through an advertisement, then you are getting a lot more people to actually buy the book. So if it's 4 out of 100, the 40 out of 1,000 would be 400 out of 10,000. I had to do that math or I was going to get it wrong. So that means for every 10,000 people, you're actually selling 100 more books. So I'm not saying everyone's getting 10,000 people to their page. It would be nice if that was the case. But even a slight change could, if you're, it's a $2 book, you get an extra $200. Now, there's an improvement of even more than that. 2%, you get an extra 200. 4%, you get, an extra 400. If you keep improving your copy and you make these incremental changes in how many people actually buy your book, then you just sell more books. So like it's worth trying at the least, because why not do something that's free that sells you more books?
That's a great point. And you even used math, which will appeal to my listeners who understand math. And I'm glad you actually did the math, because I was like, oh no, he's saying numbers. And my mind started to just go. But no, that was very, very good. And I think, that is sort of the thing, is that we don't always, we think, oh, 1%, oh, this, it doesn't make that much of a difference. But when it's your bottom line, it does make a difference. And, maybe you're making other changes too. Maybe if something's not working, you change up your book cover, you change up the copy, and little changes that you can make all increase your sales. Why wouldn't you do it? So I think that's very practical.
And you want to hear something also fun?
Yes, I do.
About numbers? Okay. So you could change your copy in your book description, maybe up things 1%. Then you go to your emails, your emails that get sent out to your readers, maybe hopefully automatically, you're using an autoresponder sequence of some kind. You improve those, that goes up 1%. You improve the copy on your landing page to actually bring people into your mailing list. Things can go up 1%. You improve your Facebook ad copy. It could go up by 1%. They could all go up by way more than 1%. And so you can use copy to actually say, well, let's get more people into my mailing list. Let's get more people to click on my ad. And then let's get more people from that ad to actually join my mailing list. Then let's get the people who join my mailing list to actually click on more of my links in my emails. And then you have your book description at the end of that, and you have that improved. So you can actually really, pile these all on top of each other. And with improved copy, I really do think people should have the best cover, the best editing, the best everything. But we actually have more points of our funnel where copy is a factor. And so we need to, and we're missing out if we aren't going through our system. Where are the people coming in? Where are they clicking? Where are they doing whatever? If we don't work on our copy, at least to improve it just a little bit, we're losing people. And neither of us, no one out there can really afford that these days. We've got to make it all as good as it can be.
Well, I think we're all convinced now that was actually really effective, and kind of, I think sometimes I think about like the tunnel vision of just like the one or two things we need to do, but it's like, oh yeah, your email's copy. Oh yeah, your Facebook ad, if you're using that as copy, or even your Facebook post. So if people are convinced, what are the things they can do to work on their copy? Like, what are some of the things that you would suggest in terms of practical ways to improve this?
I think the best way is almost to forget the way that you write your usual book, the prose in your book, where you write your rough draft and then you go line by line and edit it. That's not how you should do copy, really. There's a few areas. For the most part, if it's a longer email, you don't need to run every sentence through Twitter. But for the certain most important parts, like say the first line where you really need to hook people, and maybe that call to action where you really want to make sure they take action, don't just write one. Practice. Write 5 different ideas for a headline, and some of which should be drastically different than your first idea. Write 5 different ideas for a call to action. One of those is probably going to be better than the other 5, and it might not be the first one you come up with. The problem I see so many authors who are writing a description, who are writing an email, the problem is they have this line they just love. This line that's just not very good, but they're forcing it. Like, they're pushing it through. They're trying to make something out of it. When really, this line that was problematic for them, they should have just written like 5 different versions of this line. And then one of those versions would be better. And then they use that instead. It's the whole thing with, I mean, you and I have both listened to all the things about, like, garbage in, garbage out. And we're like, what does that even mean? But it's the same with copy. If you have a sentence that isn't working, just trying to rewrite that sentence won't necessarily do it. But having several different versions of it, this is not prose. We don't need things to like logically connect with 20 chapters ago or whatever. We just have this one little section. And so we have the ability to rewrite different lines a lot of different ways. And that can give us just these new ideas, these new ways of looking at it. And I think that's something I haven't even talked about too much. So you're like, you guys are getting this kind of
We've got an exclusive. Awesome.
Exclusive. Before I talk about it a lot to my students as I revise some of the stuff I'm working on. But if you do this, just the first line of your emails, your descriptions, your landing pages, write 5 versions, pick the best one. I promise you're going to get more, you're going to see more from that than you are from just trying to tear your hair out and write this line, change one word in there to make it perfect.
That's great advice. Because I think we do get, especially, I mean, we're talking to people who do a lot of writing, right? So we do a lot of that. We do a lot of picking apart of like the one word kind of thing. And I like this idea of kind of freeing it up to write 5 and then choose from them instead of, just trying to tweak and tweak. I know I was, kind of thinking about subject lines. I think it's Upworthy. I think I was reading that they do like 22 possible headlines for every story that they write. And you like a master of viral content because they write 22 things. And often they'll say, not necessarily the last ones they come up with, but the ones that are sort of the most like we're just stretching to try to get to the 22 or 25 or whatever it is. Sometimes those are the ones because you're just trying to get something out there and you're surprised by what kind of comes out of that. Instead of, like you're saying, like just tweaking and hammering at this one thing to change one word. So I really like that advice. That's not something I would have thought of. So,
well, thank you. And I love those kinds of blogging tools out there, like those headline generators, and there's no reason you can't even just find something free and throw a line in there and see kind of what comes out, because sometimes it just helps to have an outside, even if it's a computer, an outside opinion messing around with your headlines.
There's a couple. I like the CoSchedule headline analyzer, and there's an emotional headline analyzer, emotional marketing. It's some long name, and it's a website that looks like it was built in 1997. But it's actually really good. Have you seen that? I'm like, what's wrong with your website? But there's one that is so terrible. I'll have to leave a link in the show notes and send it to you. But it's kind of like I forgot what it's even called, but I shared it with my Facebook group, and we had the best time because it gives you higher scores if you use like celebrity names. And if you use numbers and body parts. And so like we all started plugging in like a normal headline. And for whatever reason, it really likes the Kardashians. I mean, I guess because they're everywhere. So like it would go from, how to sell your books to how Kim Kardashian's butt can help you sell 5,000 books. And that was like A+. And so I was like, there are some tools that are helpful. And then there are these tools, which are just sort of like for a good time, try this headline analyzer because, obviously we're not going to use that.
The great thing about that is, though, if you take like Kim Kardashian out of it and you just like put in a concept instead, that actually is a better headline.
There you go. So yes, like, maybe we should take that. And
how copywriting... well, there's no but. We can't really put that in.
We have to have a body part. It doesn't score as well without a body part. So,
how copywriting's butt will help you sell 5,000 books.
There you go. So
A- because no Kim Kardashian. But.
Yes, but hey, if it actually works. But that's the question: is what does? Well, okay. So for somebody listening who's like, ain't nobody got time for that. Is there a point at which someone should just hire somebody like you to write their copy for them?
I think it really comes down to long-term, what your goals are. If you say, I'm going to write 20 more books for the rest of my career, and I have the funds set aside to be able to pay someone to do it every time, do it. But if you're like, I'm going to write 20 more books, or I'm going to write 50 more books or 100 more books, and you say, well, that sounds like a lot of money, then you might want to get some kind of training. You might want to teach yourself to do it because those kind of things, paying people, to do something for you, it does add up. And so I like the idea of, the teach a man to fish, et cetera, et cetera. If you learn to do it yourself, if you improve your skills to a certain extent, it's going to not only affect your copywriting, but improving my copywriting has really bled over to my fiction and nonfiction because I understand the value of words a little better. I'm catching sounds that I might not have caught before, and I'm able to add like a little more of a flourish to certain segments that maybe would have just kind of been boring on their own. So I think when you do actually take the time to learn, whether it be self-instructed or through a course of some kind, whether you are, however you do it, it can actually improve your other writing too. And since one of the big points of trying to write, people say, your first 1,000,000 words will be crap and then you get better. But the way you get better is through deliberate practice, through learning more things. And so learning copywriting is a good way to give yourself a nice little boost on your other stuff too.
That's excellent. I like that it kind of can go both ways. So if we become better copywriters, we're going to become better writers. And if you're a writer, you can write copy. You can. I feel empowered. Be empowered. This is hopefully what people will walk away with instead of like the continued despair about copywriting. So get over the despair. You can totally do this. And if not, just plug every sentence into the Kim Kardashian headline generator, and then
you're set.
Then you're all good to go. So Bryan, where can people find you if they are now desperate for more information on copy or want to read your fiction or just find all of the different things that you do?
Well, they can head over for copywriting. They can head over to sellingforauthors.com. And I'm revamping. I don't know when this show will be up, but I am revamping my Bryan Cohen, and that's Bryan with a Y.com website to actually reflect the 9 million projects I'm working on, so that it's, instead of it just having my fiction on there, it'll have info about my fiction, my copywriting, and everything, so that it's all in one tidy little place.
Awesome. And I know we already have a lot of listeners to the Sell More Books show. So I feel like you're like me in some ways. You're doing a whole lot of things. Mm-hmm. People are like, how do you do it? So you're on the Sell More Books show. And then you also have another podcast, Something Nice to Say, which is just, for the entertainment times, not for learning about copy. It
is a dark, humorous comedy podcast.
Yes, which I think will, reach out to some of my listeners as well.
Good.
We like the dark humor over here. So I do. So I assume people do because they're here, listening to me. So I assume that people like that. But I really appreciate you coming in and taking the time to help copy seem more accessible, give us a reason to do it, and also give us some helpful and exclusive tips on how to do better copy. So thanks for coming over onto the show today, Bryan.
Thank you so much for having me.
Do you feel any different about copywriting after hearing from Bryan and me in a tunnel? I really enjoyed this interview and just kind of the idea of wrapping my brain around copywriting and reframing it so that I'm not one of those people who thinks I'm not a copywriter. I'm a creative writer. I write fiction or I write this and that, but copy, it just made me feel like it was a little bit more accessible and even something that I could kind of sink my teeth into in a good way. So I hope it did the same thing for you. If you want to find links that we talked about and more in the show notes, you can go to createifwriting.com/078. And I've got a couple more cool links for you today. So I've got a great deal for you guys. I am now working with ConvertKit as a sponsor of the show, which means that you can get a free month of ConvertKit if you go to createifwriting.com/ConvertKit. And if you don't know what ConvertKit is, I talk about it a lot, but it's my email service provider. It's my favorite. It's really improved and changed the way I think about email even, which is kind of a weird thing for your email service provider to do. But it's a company that I really love and have been super excited to use for the past year and highly recommend. So if you want to see what all the hype is about, because a lot of people are talking about, I'm an affiliate for them. They are sponsoring the show by offering a free month to you guys. So head over to createifwriting.com/ConvertKit to try a month for free. And this isn't an offer that you can get all the time. So it's a big deal. Go try it. See what you think getting into the back end of ConvertKit and the different options that you have. I also am a part of something that's really cool that's going on in the month of December. And it's a planning party with Nicole Culver of Blissful Bites podcast. And it's going to be basically kind of it's not quite a group challenge, but it's kind of like getting a group together and getting excited about planning for 2017, kind of finding the holes in your business and finding ways to plug those up and getting all your things planned. So I would love for you guys to join us. And if you would like to do that, I'm actually speaking she's going to have a summit going on later in January that I'm speaking at, and I will be an affiliate for that. So if you want to join the planning party, that does not mean necessarily you have to go to the summit, although it's going to be really good. But this is an affiliate link if you do join and decide to buy into the summit. So if you want to join the planning party, you can head to createifwriting.com/planning. And that's my affiliate link, although the planning party is totally free. So I would love to see you in there as we kind of gear up for 2017. I don't know about you, but I am heavily planning and getting things kind of lined up mentally and otherwise for the next year. So I'd love to see you in there. Again, that's createifwriting.com/planning. A big thanks to Jasmine Commerce for the music for the show. And you can find more of Jasmine's amazing music at jasminecommercemusic.com. Oh, there was a baby noise. Did you hear that one? It's fun recording a podcast with a baby. Thank you guys so much for listening. I would love it if you enjoy the podcast, if you would leave a rating and review on iTunes. That helps legitify. I think I'm a little tired and have not had enough coffee today. It helps legitify me as a podcast and helps other people find me and listen to the show and think that it's something worth listening to. So if you think it's worth listening to, drop down some stars, leave a little honest review. I would love that. I really appreciate my listeners and community. And if you want to connect further and join the community, you can do that at creativewriting.com/community or subscribe to my email to get the good stuff at creativewriting.com/subscribe. I hope that you have an inspired week.